So, welcome everyone to today's episode. I'm Serap Zal, your host. I'm happy to have Leanne Maskell with us today, an incredible advocate and author known for her work on ADHD awareness and support globally. And Leanne has dedicated her career to empowering individuals with ADHD to embrace their unique strengths and also thrive personally and professionally. And Leanne, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Likewise.
Great. So I'm particularly excited to talk about this topic, a very important topic with you. As I told you, I have family members, ex-colleagues with ADHD. But before we jump into the deeper conversation, I would like to kick off our chat with a short, icebreaker questions, let's say. Is that okay for you?
Of course, yeah.
Perfect. Preferred work environment for ADHD, is it high energy or calm? What do you think?
But then organized chaos within the calm.
Yes. Okay. And managing ADHD at work, routine or spontaneity?
Both. So similar. Have a routine and then spontaneity within the routine.
Okay. Great. And key quality in ADHD leaders, is it vision or adaptability?
I think it's adaptability. I think both, but again,
Yes.
both. I would say you have to just constantly adapt to your own vision because it changes every day.
Yeah, indeed. So your favorite strategy for focusing, deep work sessions or frequent breaks?
Deep work for me.
Deep work. Full
Hyper-focus. Yeah.
focus. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that. Let's start with listening your journey because I know it's quite inspiring and it's non-traditional, I would say. So, how did it shape your professional life? I mean, this ADHD awareness and also lead you to be advocate for others with ADHD and create this inclusive environment for them.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Because it's funny to hear it because it doesn't feel that way. It's just kind of what has happened. Like I imagine a lot of people with ADHD feel similar. The dots have just connected. So I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until the age of 25, and basically until that point, I really found it very, very difficult to get and keep a job for longer than a few weeks. I just ended up traveling all over the world, like couldn't stay in a place longer than a month, and became really bad with my mental health. Had no idea that it was ADHD by the time I saw a psychiatrist, but I had to pay quite a lot of money to do so. And yeah, and I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I didn't think that was real. I said, I've got a real problem. He was like, you've got really bad ADHD. And he was right. You know, it was really difficult time for me. I was traveling again on holiday. I didn't come back for a year because I moved in with someone that I met on the beach. And I came back and said, yes, I believe you. But that diagnosis changed everything for me because it enabled me to access understanding of how my brain worked and then access support, like medication. And then I was able to get a job in law, which I kept for 2.5 years, mental health and disability and immigration law. And yeah, it was just life-changing for me. And so that experience made me quite passionate to help other people because I couldn't believe that I didn't know that. And then when I started my law job, I was struggling again, even though I lived over the road because I was so determined not to quit the job. And I was struggling with like kind of the things you just routine, chaos, organization. Then I just decided to start looking into ADHD some more. I changed doctor and they told me that their waiting list was 7 years long for people to get an assessment. And I just couldn't believe it. God, that's not even 7 years ago now. That was 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it that was I said if I had to wait 7 years, I would be dead. And so I just wrote this book at work. I just went back to work and wrote the book. And I said, well, at least there's more information that you can give to people in the meantime
Yeah.
if they're all on this list. And from writing that book, I kind of found out about ADHD coaching, ended up quitting my job and becoming an ADHD coach and training. And now I run ADHD Works. And it's a very funny, very opposite lifestyle where I'm like training companies like Google and Microsoft.
Yeah, indeed. Wow, that's so nice.
Never would have even applied for previously because I just would assume I'd be rejected from all of them. So it's a very funny experience, but it kind of shows how if you put people in that right environment for them and give them the right tools, and understanding to work with their brain, they can achieve really incredible things.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And I think at the beginning, maybe you felt a little bit alone in this journey. But I guess after writing a book, giving trainings and researching more and more, there's a big community. And you can make a much bigger impact on other people, right?
Yeah, that was why I wrote it, because
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything on the internet a few years ago about ADHD. I had been told by doctors that I didn't have ADHD or that I was fine because I had a law degree. And I was like, oh, well, I keep ruining my life. And yeah, and so when I was diagnosed, I still didn't really accept it. And it was only through hearing a podcast where people talked about the emotional regulation side of it that it kind of resonated. And yes, now I have many people with ADHD in my life. It's all I talk about all day, every day. And but it's funny because I feel like the internet gives you a really great community, amazing, and especially for me, obviously creating my own company. Like we work with thousands of amazing people like yourself, like all over the world. And it's funny because then in my real life, outside of work, it still can feel a bit difficult and like isolating. So I've just had an autism diagnosis as well
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and like it's a good reminder for me of how difficult it is when you're not in these environments where people kind of understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
But we're lucky. There's a great amount of awareness and understanding out there, and so many people that want to help. So
Yeah. And I think you are contributing a lot. And I also would like to contribute through this type of conversations to our community at Uplift as well. So I would like to ask a little bit about the business perspective. You are also a founder of your company. You are running a business, like coaching, training business. So from your experience, how does ADHD present also some unique leadership qualities? Because we know that many famous business leaders with ADHD and some other spectrums, I guess. I know there are different names, but how do you see those unique leadership competencies or traits you are bringing in?
yeah, there's actually a 300 times higher likelihood of you starting your own business if you have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that it's because your brain is literally wired differently to how most people's brains work. So you have innovative problem solving skills. Like when I wrote that book about ADHD, I was like, there's no book about ADHD. I'm going to write one. Like, I was like, I'm going to fix the problem. Why not me? Like, and
Yeah.
I was just 26 and I had just been diagnosed and I was not a neuroscientist. And I was like, well, that's not out there, so someone
Yeah.
needs to do it. And I think it's like impulsivity as well. So I think all of the kind of challenges that come with ADHD can also be the huge, huge strengths, like especially the passion, because you can really feel things very deeply. And especially, I think a lot of people that are neurodivergent, they have spent their lives feeling like outsiders and feeling like they don't belong. But then when you realize that you can actually help other people to feel like they belong, it's a really good it's amazing thing to be able to do. And especially with that like innovative, God, running a company is just so much fun. I made up a course recently called the neuroaffirmative training to help actually people that are not neurodivergent mainly learn the skills to help each other, because everyone thinks differently.
Yeah.
And like that training has never been done before. And yeah, it's amazing because you can just turn all of your ideas into reality, and you have this completely unique, creative, curious mindset, and very caring. And we try to spin all of the plates at once. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can't put them in a box. So make very, very good leaders, I think.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, especially as we talk about diversity all the time, I think this is also diversity, right? So bringing different thoughts, ideas together, not only the gender diversity, but diversity in thoughts.
Exactly, yeah.
Is a way that to embrace all those differences that we bring together, and especially from recruiting perspective. So I would like to ask this for my team and the other recruiters and HR leaders in different companies. So how can we really create more inclusive process in the hiring process for the candidates with ADHD or leaders that we interact with? So do you suggest anything like actionable maybe to think about?
Yes, I think it's really, really important. I actually have worked with many senior leaders that have ADHD,
Yeah.
so many of them. And every time I do a talk at like Deutsche Bank or Bank of America or Disney or wherever, there's always the most senior people will come up to me and be like, I think maybe I've got ADHD. And it's because that's probably why they are in their jobs, because they are like visionary, they think ahead, they are not afraid to stand up for what they believe in, they are, you know, very, very hardworking.
But
And
you say, Leon, sorry for interrupting, but are they aware that they have ADHD or they are not aware?
after we do the training, they often come up to me and say, I think I've got ADHD. They don't have it diagnosed, but most often their children do.
Mm,
And
hmm.
then they say, oh, actually, I've realized, this, but I don't know if I should get an assessment. And so for many, many companies, they've actually already got neurodivergent ADHD in these positions. They just maybe don't know about it because also what I see when I coach senior leaders is that they do not want to tell people because they're like, they've worked really, really hard to get to where they are.
Yeah.
If they find out they've got ADHD at like 40, to suddenly turn around to your company and say, actually, I've got this condition, and if you Google it, it says, there's a disorder and everyone is jumping on the bandwagon, then it can be a really vulnerable thing to do. But that's really important because I actually think that um, change comes from the top. So for you asked about my company, like I think one of the reasons that it's been incredibly successful in the last 2 years, where we've trained 350 coaches all around the world. We've done so many, we've run like 2 retreats, we do so many things. But it's because I just created the environment I needed for myself. So like everyone works from home. I don't care what hours they work. They do the work. Like, I don't really care about like micromanaging people. I just trust them all and make sure that everyone has a really clear understanding of what they need to do. And I'll make adjustments for people, but I wouldn't even call them adjust. I just tailored. So we have one employee who she didn't like doing emails. And when I talked to her about it, she said, yeah, I really don't like doing emails, but I really like data. And I said, oh, great, we'll put you in the data. Oh, I hate data. I was like, you do the data. And then she said, oh, but I'm sure no one likes doing emails. And I said, no, we'll find someone. And we found someone brilliant who's done the emails for a year. And it's just actually that cognitive diversity. And like that individual, she was not neurodivergent. She's neurotypical. And it kind of shows how if you put people all in that zone of genius, then they will thrive no matter what kind of label you put on them. But I think from a recruitment and senior leadership perspective, it's creating environments where people feel safe to share and where they want to. So we trained a senior executive at the Law Society recently as an ADHD coach, and he's amazing. He like advocates for ADHD online, and he's really, really passionate about it. It's like creating that kind of safety in others where they feel like, oh, this is something I actually am going to risk to
Yeah.
share because it is a really vulnerable thing to do so, and you can't control other people's reactions. And I think that comes from everyone actually being vulnerable about their own experiences because we all have got. I did a training at a charity for these senior leaders.
Mm.
And when I went in, I was quite scared because there was 12 of them all sitting around a table and they all looked very professional. And then I started it off by asking, and I asked the person before, I said, who booked me, I said, do they have ADHD? Like, and they said, no, 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 no. I was like, so I went in and I said, I'm going to go around the table and can you just tell me if you have any experience of neurodiversity? And every single one of them had a child or a friend or them like thinks they're neurodivergent. And so it's remembering like actually if it wasn't that, it was mental health. Like everyone is experienced by this. It's just that maybe in the workplace, especially at
Mhm.
senior levels, we pretend that it doesn't exist there, but it does more than anywhere.
Yeah, I think that creating safe net is definitely critical, and I think that also triggers the inclusivity at that time, right? So if
Yeah.
you don't open up, and then there is no really inclusivity that we can talk about. Everything it becomes like a at the surface level. You can't really bring that diversity and embrace it properly. So I think that's a really good tip. And you have trained organizations like Google, Disney, or Bank of America. I mean, really good names and good brands. So, can you maybe share a few best practices that you have heard, or maybe you have advised them to do it to support ADHD individuals at workplace?
Well, one of the most amazing things that I've done with this company is create ADHD champions for Disney. And so I made this because, again, did you see the ADHD here? They came and said that they were supporting their employees with accessing assessments for neurodiversity. So they would cover those on the medical insurance, which is amazing, first of all,
That's
because they
great. Wow. Yeah.
so if your company can do that, it makes a huge difference to your life. But but then you have to deal with the consequences of being diagnosed, because then it does change everything for you. And so I kind of asked them about that, and we talked about how to support them. And literally on the call, we came up with an idea to create this ADHD Champions program, which is kind of similar to what we have in the UK called Mental Health First Aiders, where we would teach people kind of a mini version of ADHD coaching skills and education.
Oh, nice.
They trained 250 of their mental health first aiders who were already the kind of designated people to go to about mental health. And I gave them all a logo calling themselves an ADHD champion. And we gave them workbooks and exercises so that if someone wanted to explore this, but they didn't feel comfortable, talking to their manager or HR, or they don't have an assessment, or their child's been diagnosed, they could see this logo and know that that person has had training and is not going to tell them that, like, ADHD is not real, but he can actually help them to figure out what to do with that information. And that was a really incredible thing, which then I went on to train other companies with, and created it as a kind of course that people can do themselves online. So that was, I think that kind of support is really amazing, where you have peer support, because this stuff is really scary. But if you have someone that you can talk to about it, and like a leader who is open about their own experiences, then it can help you to feel a lot safer, and like you've got support in place. And I think the other things that I've seen from companies in general are just training for managers as well.
Yeah.
Mandatory training is really important, because if you run a kind of ADHD session, let's say, one off, first of all, not everybody can make it. Second of all, maybe the people that really need to go to it are not going to go because they don't want to. And so having mandatory training, but like making it relevant and interesting. So this neuroaffirmative training that I created recently is not really specific to things like ADHD, but it's more like, how can we all just work together effectively? Like, how do you give someone bad feedback without them crying?
Yeah.
It's all these tricky human, how do we overcome our own biases, not just by the obvious, like external, but also internal, because it's easy to accept people that we are like, and we think, yeah, I'm really accepting, but actually a lot harder to accept the people that trigger us, or, like people that we might be politically opposed to. But as long as we allow that to happen, then we're getting further and further excluded from one another. So I think it's about bringing people together and creating communities, especially within the workplace, because there are a lot of legal requirements that can come up with disability, and it's all really grey for companies. It's not clear. It's all very philosophical and vague, so it's really hard for them. But I think the key thing I would say to any company is have a policy in place for this, like reasonable adjustments, neurodiversity, disability. Because if you have that policy in place, then everyone is on the same page, including managers, HR, employees, whereas many don't. And without that, then it's really hard for anyone to know what to do.
Yeah.
I think there's a
It
fear about.
becomes so vague as well, right? So like they manage case by case. Probably it is not also bringing a standard as well, like standard approach.
Exactly. So it's what you said earlier, that question, routine or spontaneity. So it's like, if you create the routine, then you can have the spontaneity within the routine. Like, people know how to have these conversations, they know what to talk about, they know that they're not going to like get in trouble or say the wrong thing. But it is really difficult, because it is really vulnerable and scary, I think, for people. And but remembering, I think there's, what I've seen a lot is a lot of focus on like neurodivergent people, but actually it's everyone. It's not, they're people.
Yeah.
We're all people. You might be undiagnosed. Who knows? People weren't diagnosed with ADHD, adults in the UK, until 2008. So there's so many people out there that are not diagnosed. Like, in autistic people over the age of 50, 9 out of 10 of them are not diagnosed. So it's like there are so many people out there, like generational divide, that are seeing people now coming through the kind of opposite end, like the recruitment phase, and they're like, oh, we'll make them adjustment for their woke needs, snowflake generation. But actually it's because they've struggled throughout their whole life without that support in place. And they deserve that
Yes,
support as much as like new graduate people. And like, why does it have to be difficult for everybody?
Yeah, I think really having awareness in the early stages, like early years of life, I think it's much better, right? To be able to manage your expectations, your environment, where you want to be, what you want to do as job as well. Because I think everyone has a unique skill set and competencies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think your work definitely is inspiring for them and increasing this awareness. And as you mentioned, also unconscious bias, conscious and unconscious bias are there out there for everyone. So I think increasing that awareness is really really key. I guess as a first step, right? So and also I think companies should have, as you mentioned, like should have those conversations openly and creating that championship or ambassador programs to maybe reward as well this open conversations instead of creating negative perceptions, right?
Yeah, instead of putting it through HR, who were like, "Oh, we don't know what to do." Like, God, when I worked in a company, everyone was terrified of HR. So, it's
Yeah. And also as the HR leaders, I think we need to just bring people with us, not only us doing something for them, right? So if we can create something together, and coaching is definitely a good way to open doors from that perspective. And also, I want to ask from that coaching perspective, like, can you share maybe examples from your coaching experience where maybe small adjustments can be done? I mean, based on your one-to-one maybe experience with the HR people or business leaders or any professional, like how can you really help with the coaching to them?
yeah, that's actually something I should have mentioned when you asked about those companies. So, very nicely, they've all had people trained as ADHD coaches with us. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really great start because you're giving people the tools and understanding to support others. And then I had another training where I talked about kind of neuro-inclusivity, and one of the HR leaders, they saw me talking about interview questions in advance.
Mm.
And they couldn't believe, they were like, we can do that. They're like, does that help people? I'm like, yes, that helps. And actually, John Lewis also have started doing that publicly now. They put the questions for the interviews on their website in advance.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
For me, after this call, I'm going to go and do 2 interviews. And I gave them both the questions in advance because I was like, why not? Like, I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't want them to be nervous. Like, and I know the pain for me personally, when I've had interviews, I've had panic attacks because I've tried to memorize questions to every single possible question in the entire universe and got so anxious. And then they would ask me questions like completely different, and I would just say the first random thing that popped into my head and feel like an idiot. So having them in advance just actually creates that psychological safety for everybody, and it doesn't mean that you have to stick to them like a robot, but you have that shared, again, like that shared page that you're on, like you understand what you're talking about, you understand what is expected of you. So that company afterwards said they were going to do that as well because they were like, that's so easy. Like, yes, yes, these things are very, very easy. We had another one. I coached a senior leader, and he basically was struggling because they had a very fancy organizational restructure with a consultancy,
Wow.
and they changed all of the administrative ways of working. So this guy had 3 separate administrative assistants.
Wow.
He was really overwhelmed, and I looked at his kind of expectations that he'd made for them, and I was like, these don't. First of all, they're not very specific. They're like, if you want, you could do this. I was like, we should be specific. And then he established that having just one would be a lot more helpful than having 3 of them like all split up.
Simple is the best.
Yeah, and until that point, he had not told them about ADHD. And when he told them, he said it's because we've got ADHD and I've had this coaching, it's been really helpful. And then they were like, we also hate this new structure. And then they changed it throughout the whole company because it wasn't actually working for anyone. And then all of these people came and told him that they also have ADHD. So it's like, and that is a brilliant example of how like it does come from the top down. I coached someone else who,
Indeed.
when they were diagnosed, they told their company on a retreat, and over half of the people told them that they also were neurodivergent. So it's like when you see someone at the top saying this, then you feel safe to be yourself, really.
Yeah, yeah, no, these are great examples. And especially, I think leaders should be role models, of course, for the rest. And maybe lastly, I may ask you about the HR leaders, like, because HR leaders should be visionary on our, like, a little bit like policy setter as well, like bringing these championship programs. And so maybe like your last thoughts about or suggestions to HR leaders to initiate this type of programs.
Yeah, I would read ADHD Works at Work, which is a book I wrote for,
Yes. We have
essentially.
4 books, right? So yeah,
But
that's
that book kind of covers it because I think it's the blend. So I think it's really, really important for HR to recognize their legal duties of the employer and to treat neurodiversity and disability kind of like any other health and safety implication at work. Like it should be something that is like really consciously thought about all the time because it goes to the root of human beings. It's like everyone thinks differently. So creating environments where everybody feels safe is really important and making information accessible to them, particularly in situations like job applications, not making people type up their CV after they've uploaded it. Like really simple, basic, common sense things that are nice for everybody. Offering people examples of adjustments because again, if you are neurodivergent, you might have no idea what to ask for or what is available. And then I think once people are kind of in the job, the same thing, remembering that they might not tell you immediately. Very often I coach people that say, I want to pass my probation, then I'm going to tell HR.
oh yeah,
Oh, I was like, maybe you're not going to pass probation if you don't tell them because they're really struggling. So,
indeed.
like creating that environment and saying to them, like, I think it can be really useful if you basically give as much information as possible. So saying, if you tell us, we don't have to tell your manager, it's more just to make sure that you're okay and having that conversation and recognizing that on the one side, you as the company have got a legal obligation to support people that might have disability. And on the other side, you're a human and they're a human, and it's just about having a human to human conversation and treating people like human beings and like knowing that they're not gonna fit in the box. They're not gonna tell you what exactly magical support they need that will
Yeah.
perfectly fit in with exactly what you were thinking of conceding to them. I think I don't really love the word adjustments because it's not about adjusting or accommodating people. It's actually about like improving things for everybody. It's just an opportunity to make people feel comfortable and enjoy their experiences, no
Yeah.
matter what. And we spend so much time at work, so if you can help people to have a good time, it's good. And I think just giving people reassurance because people, particularly with ADHD, can experience a lot of anxiety around things like HR, getting into trouble. I worked with someone recently who was sent for an occupational health assessment and very anxious about it because, whilst the company think, oh, cool, we're just going to see what support is available, that individual was like, I'm being fired.
Yeah.
Just I don't think you can give too much reassurance.
Yes. Yeah.
And every day, it's not and also to everyone, it's not just a one day, one off thing. It's like to everybody, just be a nice person. Pretty simple.
Yeah, no, these are really great examples and coming from like real life
Yeah.
experiences. So thanks for sharing them, Leanne.
Yeah.
And I can't believe like we came at the end of our episodes now, but it has been absolute pleasure having you. And thanks a lot for sharing your wisdom. And I really recommend our listeners also to check your coaching program and books as well. And I think this will really help to make a bigger impact on our organizations and create more inclusive work environments and professionally and personally as well, I think. Thanks for joining. It was an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.